Everywhere you look in fire-ravaged LA, scenes of apocalyptic destruction, as 6 different wildfires turn some of the most iconic neighborhoods in the world into moonscapes. Here's where things stand this evening. At least 11 people are dead. More than 150,000 are under evacuation orders. And some 10,000 buildings and structures have been burned to the ground.
LA has been burning for over 2 weeks now. People are running for their lives because fires don't discriminate. They don't care who you are. They are tearing through neighborhoods, taking homes and lives with them. Even Hollywood's elite are not safe. Mark Hamill barely made it out before his neighborhood was swallowed by fire. But not everyone was as lucky. Some well-known faces didn't make it. And today, we remember them. So, who were the unfortunate celebrities who lost their lives in the LA fires? Rory Callum Sykes. Among those lost in the devastation was Rory Callum Sykes, a man who spent his entire life overcoming the impossible, only to be caught in a disaster no one could fight. This is not just another tragic fire story. Rory's life was one of resilience and a strong will to push past limits. But when the flames came roaring towards his Malibu home, there was nothing left to fight. So who was Rory, and why does his story matter? Rory Callum Sykes came into the world with the odds stacked against him. He was born blind, born with cerebral palsy, so life was tough for him and his parents from the beginning. Doctors didn't expect much. Some might have even assumed he would live a quiet, dependent life. But Rory proved them wrong. Surgeries, therapies, relentless effort, he did it all. And he survived through everything. He regained his sight, learned to walk, and turned his struggles into a source of inspiration for others. If anyone ever needed a reminder that life's obstacles can be conquered, Rory was it. But even the strongest fighters have their limits. And on January 8, 2025, Rory met his. The fire was fast. In fact, it was too fast. By the time it reached his family's 17-acre estate in Malibu, there was no stopping it. His mother, Shelley Sykes, was right there. She tried to fight the flames, tried to put out embers with a garden hose, but there was no water. The municipal supply had been shut off, which meant they had no water in the middle of a wildfire, and Rory knew what was coming. His mother begged him to leave, to get in the car and escape, but he refused to go. She says that he kept saying that this is our home. I cannot leave it behind. Shelley had a broken arm, so she could not help him get into the car, so she ran to find help. 400 meters away, she finally reached a fire station. By the time she returned, it was too late. Rory's cottage was gone, reduced to nothing but ash. And Rory had succumbed to carbon monoxide poisoning before the flames could even reach him. It was a horrible end for a man who had spent his life fighting to live. But Rory's life was not about tragedy. We have to remember him for his triumphs. Before all this, he had built a remarkable career despite his disabilities. A former child actor, Rory was once the face of Kitty Capers, which is a British children's TV show from the late 90s. But TV fame was not what defined him. What really made Rory stand out was his ability to inspire. By the age of 8, he was already giving motivational speeches. He worked alongside Tony Robbins, one of the biggest names in the self-help world. He traveled across the globe, speaking to thousands, proving to everyone that disability did not mean defeat. Not only that, he co-founded Happy Charity, which is an organization dedicated to bringing hope and happiness to people who are struggling, because if anyone knew what it meant to struggle, it was Rory. His impact was real, and that's why his loss hurts so much. Now let's talk about something that should make everyone angry. Rory didn't just die because of a wildfire. He died because the water was turned off, because even 50 firefighters on his property could not do anything without water. Let's be real. This might have started a natural disaster, but at this point it is just a failure. Shelley Sykes is furious, and rightfully so. She is considering legal action, demanding answers. Because when someone fights so hard their whole life, they deserve better than this. And as if that was not enough, Rory's death was not even counted in the official wildfire death toll. That number is still rising as authorities go through the burned neighborhoods, but the man who made a global impact was somehow overlooked. So what's left now? Nothing can bring Rory back. His home is gone, his mother is shattered, his pet peacocks, Edgy and Mickey, survived, but he didn't. But what does remain is his legacy. People will remember his words, his work, and the way he proved everyone wrong time and time again. They will remember how he turned struggles into strength and inspired others to do the same. And his mother refuses to let this fire be the final word. She said that she will rebuild this house, she will make it better and more beautiful so Rory can rest in peace. Because Rory Callum Sykes was not just a victim, he was a fighter. And even though the flames took everything, they cannot erase that. Even though Rory could not survive the brutal LA fires, there was one who managed to get out just in time. Mark Hamill. Mark Hamill is a man who has played heroes on screen, but a few nights ago he was just another person trying to escape a disaster that was coming to kill him. The LA fires have been tearing through neighborhoods, forcing thousands to flee, and Mark was one of them. He barely made it out. And when we say barely, we mean there were flames on both sides of the road as he and his wife, Malibu York, drove away, trying to reach safety. It was already evening when they decided to leave. That's how fast things got out of control. At 7 p.m., he was still at home in Malibu, and by the time they got on the road, it felt like they were driving through a firestorm. The sky was thick with smoke, the heat was everywhere, and the road to the Pacific Coast Highway was lined with small fires already sparking up. There was no time to think, no time to pack. Just grab what you can, get in the car, and hope you make it through. Mark, Marilu, and their dog Trixie somehow managed to get out, reaching their daughter Chelsea's house in Hollywood just after 8 p.m. That's barely an hour to escape before the fire could have trapped them. He later called it the worst fire he had seen since 1993. And if you know anything about LA's fire history, you know that means this was really, really bad. And Mark was not the only one running for his life that night. Jamie Lee Curtis, his longtime friend, posted about how her community and possibly her home was on fire. Mandy Moore had to evacuate, grabbing her kids, her dogs, her cats, just trying to get everyone to safety. Chris Pratt was posting about the firefighters, begging people to pray for them because they were the only ones standing between the fire and total destruction. But here is what makes this even worse. There was barely any clear information. You would think with all the technology we have, it would be easy to know what's happening, where the fire is moving, and who needs to get out. But no. Even Jamie Lee Curtis was frustrated, saying that with all the conflicting reports, people did not know if they were overreacting or waiting too long. And waiting too long could be deadly. Fire does not wait for you to decide. It does not pause and let you pack your things. It does not care that your house holds years of memories, that it took you a lifetime to build what you have. When it comes, it takes. It took homes, it took up entire neighborhoods, and it took lives. Mark Hamill was lucky. He escaped, but not everyone did. There are people who thought they had more time and didn't make it out. Families lost everything. Some people came back to find nothing but ash where their homes once stood. And firefighters, those absolute heroes, were out there fighting with everything they had, sometimes without even enough water to do their jobs. Mark's home is still standing, but that does not mean this was not a close call. He left at the last possible moment. One delay, one wrong turn, and this could have been a very different story. He later said he was just relieved his family was safe, but you can tell even he was shaken by how quickly things escalated. And now the fire is still burning. People are still losing everything. The damage is not just in what the fire destroyed, it is in the fear, the uncertainty, and the feeling of helplessness that so many people felt that night. Mark Hamill survived, but he came way too close to not making it. And the worst part is that this is not over. While Mark's house miraculously survived, there are some celebrities who lost their homes and all their memories along with them. Eugene Levy. Among those caught in the chaos were two very different men, Eugene Levy and James Woods. One lost everything and the other miraculously held on, but both had to face the kind of destruction you only see in disaster movies. Let's start with Eugene Levy. We all know him as the funniest dad in Hollywood, the guy with the big eyebrows and an even bigger heart. But in real life, there was nothing funny about what happened to him. He evacuated his Pacific Palisades home on January 7th, thinking he might be able to return once the worst had passed. He said that there was thick, black smoke everywhere, choking the sky. He could not even see flames at the time, just that ominous, heavy cloud of destruction hovering over Temescal Canyon. That should have been the first sign that things were going to get bad. And then just hours later, his home was gone. Not damaged, not standing, but burned. Everything was completely leveled. When he left, his house was a home. When he returned, there was a stone chimney and some burnt-up hedges. That was it. Everything else had turned to ash. The place where he raised his family, built his career, and probably had more comedic genius moments than we can imagine wiped out in a single night. Eugene was not alone in this nightmare. Billy Crystal, Ricky Lake, Adam Brody, Paris Hilton, Mandy Moore, and Melissa Rivers, all of them lost their homes too. This fire was the worst in LA history. Over 11,000 acres burned, and at the time of his loss, 0% of the fire was contained. That's not just a bad fire, that's an unstoppable force. And the thing is, Eugene did not even get to go back and process the loss before seeing it on the news. That's how brutal this was. His house was already a headline before he could even take it all in. The worst part is no one really knows how long this will last or how bad it is going to get. The death toll is not even clear yet because some places are still burning and people have not been able to return. This wildfire season is a disaster on a level LA has never seen before. Now, if Eugene Levy's story is about total devastation, the next one is about pure luck. James Woods. This man was convinced his house was gone. He was 100% sure. He evacuated when the fire was literally right in his backyard, and from everything he could see, his entire neighborhood was in flames. He posted about it on X, saying he had accepted the fact that his home was likely gone forever. And that was a fair assumption. Houses on his exact street were burning down. The whole area looked like the surface of the moon after a meteor shower because there was just blackened debris and destruction. But somehow his house survived. Even James himself could not believe it. When he returned days later, expecting nothing but rubble, he saw his house still standing. Sure, there was smoke damage and some structural wear and tear, but compared to his neighbors, it was a miracle. And he knew it. He called it a miracle multiple times because what else do you say when your house makes it while the rest of the block is wiped out? But before we go thinking he had an easy time of it, let's back up a little. James Woods barely escaped in time. He was in the epicenter of the fire when it started, meaning when he got the evacuation order, it was a situation where he was told to get out now or die in the fire. He left with just the clothes on his back, no time to grab anything meaningful, no time to think. And this was not just a personal crisis, he also had to help his 94-year-old neighbor who has dementia get to safety. Because when chaos hits, you don't just think about yourself. He also described what he saw while leaving his home. Every house around him was burning. The wind was making the fire jump from street to street, house to house, like it had a mind of its own. The evacuation was a race against time. And when he finally reached safety, he did what a lot of people do in these moments. He assumed the worst. And let's be honest, the worst seemed pretty inevitable, until he returned and found his house miraculously untouched. Now, untouched might be pushing it. His street was still a disaster zone, but compared to what Eugene Levy went through, James Woods still had a home to walk into. And that's where their stories split. Eugene Levy has nothing to return to. He is in that horrible, gut-wrenching stage where you realize all those things you thought you would have forever are gone. His home, his memories, his belongings, they don't exist anymore. James Woods is staring at his house, knowing that a few feet in any direction it could have been a very different story. He is watching his neighbors pick through the rubble, trying to figure out what's next, while he is standing in the middle of what should have been the same fate, but wasn't. Two men from two homes in the same city were caught in the same disaster. One lost everything, the other barely made it through. There is one more famous name in this story who refused to sit back and do nothing. Steve Guttenberg. We are talking about Steve Guttenberg, the guy from Police Academy and 3 Men and a Baby. Steve lives in Pacific Palisades, one of the many areas hit by the raging inferno that has been tearing through LA. When the fire first started on January 7, it spread fast. One minute there was just a hint of smoke in the distance. The next, the sky turned black. The air got thick and suddenly people had minutes to decide whether to run or stay behind. Most people evacuated. Steve Guttenberg didn't. Instead, he stayed behind to help. He was not just thinking about himself, he was thinking about his neighbors, about the people still trapped, about the firefighters trying to battle this monster. And that's exactly what he did. While most people were busy loading up their cars and getting the hell out, Steve was doing the opposite. He was making sure emergency vehicles could get through, moving cars, directing people, and basically acting as an unofficial firefighter's assistant. He even got on the news, telling people to leave their car keys behind if they had to run. This was a good thing to do because emergency crews needed every second they could get, and having abandoned cars blocking the roads was making things worse. He told them that they had to go and leave their keys behind so someone could move their car and clear the way for the fire trucks. After the flames ripped through, Steve was lucky that his house survived, but he didn't take that as a sign to breathe easy and go back to normal life. Instead, he banded together with his neighbors. Now, this was not some casual neighborhood gathering where people complain about the HOA rules. This was survival mode. They shared food, water, and supplies. They helped each other clear brush and debris to keep the remaining embers from reigniting. They checked on each other, made sure no one was alone, and turned what could have been the complete isolation into a small, tight-knit army. And then, just when they thought they might be in the clear, the winds picked up again. If you don't know much about wildfires, here's something important. Wind is the enemy. It turns small embers into a full-blown firestorm in seconds. And on January 10, that's exactly what started happening. Steve and his neighbors didn't run. They stood their ground, doing everything they could to keep their homes safe. He said that at that time, he had the choice of sitting down and walking or standing up and doing what he could. He chose to stand and fight and help. If there has ever been a moment that proves who someone really is, this was it. Now, just because Steve's house survived doesn't mean he came out of this untouched. When he returned to his neighborhood, it looked like a war zone. Homes were burned to the ground, streets empty, places that were once full of life now reduced to rubble. At least 20 homes in his area were completely destroyed. Families who had lived there for years were gone, just like that. Steve compared it to losing someone in a sudden accident. One moment everything is fine, the next, it is just gone. It is easy to forget that celebrities are just people too. They have homes, they have memories, they feel fear just like anyone else. But what makes someone stand out is what they do when disaster strikes. And Steve Guttenberg didn't just save himself, he stood up for his community, helped those who needed it, and refused to let fear control him. His neighborhood might take years to recover, but one thing is for sure, they are not going through it alone. The criticism. Kim Kardashian, Sylvester Stallone, and Kevin Hart found themselves at the center of serious backlash, not for losing their homes, but for how they handled the crisis. Their lavish lifestyles and questionable choices didn't sit well with the public, especially when ordinary residents were struggling to conserve water, evacuate safely, or simply survive. Kim Kardashian, who is famous for her $60 million mansion in a gated community near wildfire hotspots, was caught using 232,000 gallons of water, which is way over California's strict conservation limits. Even with water-saving devices installed, the sheer amount she used was mind-boggling. Regular people were being told to cut back, while Kim's violations showed that for the wealthy, paying a fine was just another expense, not a real consequence. It highlighted an ugly truth that the rich could waste resources, while the working class struggled to follow the rules. Then there was Sylvester Stallone, another mega-rich star who ignored water restrictions to keep his luxury home in pristine condition. Like Kardashian, he racked up hefty fines but continued on as usual until the wildfires came for his property too. Suddenly, all that money and water could not stop nature. His mansion, just like everyone else's, was at risk of being engulfed in flames. For all his wealth, he was just as powerless as his less fortunate neighbors. And then there was Kevin Hart. While he also faced criticism for overusing water, he responded differently. He owned up to it, installed better conservation systems, and started using his platform to raise awareness about the importance of water conservation. He was not directly impacted by the fires, but instead of just watching, he stepped up, encouraged donations, and pushed for relief efforts. These celebrities' experiences exposed a wider issue, the gap between rich and poor when it comes to disaster survival. The wealthy can afford private firefighting services, protecting their homes while everyone else evacuates and hopes for the best. The wildfires made it painfully clear that money might give you an advantage, but it won't always save you. If you don't want to miss any updates on this, hit that subscribe button and stay in the know.